I have done it quite a few times. Have you? To move or not to move? This is the question. In this video, I will talk about job hopping in higher education in the UK. Job hopping is indeed very common in UK higher education. And there are plenty of reasons for that. First of all, in the UK context, there is nothing like a US-style tenure track. So there is no natural progression from an assistant professor to an associate to a full professor. Tenure does not really exist. You start as a lecturer, usually on probation for 1 or 3 years, and you might then get a permanent post, but the next steps are not automated. So there is no guarantee you can progress to a senior lectureship, reader, and professorship. So what do? Well, you can simply look for jobs elsewhere, apply, and start job hopping. Or you rely on the internal promotion process. Now, the issue with that is criteria tend to change over time. The whole process is not necessarily very attractive. It can be quite bureaucratic. Lots of forms to fill. It tends to be quite slow. And even if you get a promotion, you tend not to get a big jump in your pay. So the only way really to get market rate is by testing the market. You need to get an outside offer. What are the pros and cons in more detail? Certainly your career progression can be a lot faster. You get better pay and conditions. You can negotiate potentially a reduction of teaching loads and so on. You certainly increase your network when you move to different places and you work in different types of institutions. You also add to your skills, and I think that could be very beneficial. You learn more. However, there is the negative. It's quite disruptive. It always needs easily 1 year just to get used to a new place, understand the system, know the key people, and understand all the processes. There are significant costs in terms of moving and also social costs as well, because it's more difficult to maintain friendships and so on. There might be a need to commute as well, which I have done for many, many years. And honestly, one always understates the amount of time spent commuting and the significant costs. When it comes to moving, of course, you get usually relocation expenses covered, but only up to a certain level. It's quite common to go up to £8,000. Quite often it's a lot less than that. Very often it's only about £3,000 to £4,000. So it can be quite limited. And of course, realistically, once you start buying, selling houses, and consider all the costs, we easily talk about £15,000, £20,000 in moving expenses. So it can be quite substantial. So do your spreadsheet, do your calculation to see whether it really makes sense. A few thoughts, a few recommendations. You see always on YouTube, these, great videos, never accept a counter offer. And, that's just stupid. And I think, in my view, always negotiate. It's fundamentally important to do this. So if you get an offer, always discuss the details. Look at the offer letter. That's always important. You need also the offer letter to actually start negotiations with your home institution as well. Have a chat, have an open discussion, and quite often there are ways to maybe, make a counter offer very attractive. So never say never. Look at the details. Look at all the details and think about it very carefully. It's very common that when you move institutions, the new institution might insist on, for instance, probation again. So that can be usually negotiated. And in particular, if you are a mid-career or more mature academic, probation can be waived. In particular, this will be an issue if you need mortgages in a competitive market. So, in my view, always important to look at the small print and to negotiate. And if things don't work out, they don't work out. Don't force it. Never burn bridges. And I think this is something I really learned because I wasn't always really that massively smart about it. Quite often it's nice to really quit because there are good reasons and there are certain things you kind of, want to get rid of. There's a tendency that you might get a little bit overexcited. There was one case, a colleague of mine who used the opportunity, quit his job and then went to the Vice Chancellor's office to, tell him, his view of things. And I don't think it's a very smart idea. End of the day, first of all, it's not nice to do. Don't do that. And you never know, you might meet again. And in fact, academia is a very small world. So, be nice, be reasonable. It's perfectly fine to move institutions. There are good reasons very frequently. You might have a partner in your life who is looking for jobs elsewhere, so you might actually move then to make life easier. So there are plenty of good arguments why you do it. So don't use that now to start some personal fights or vendettas. It's not really worth doing. It's very hard to repair relationships, in my view. You notice this when you get a little bit older and maybe a tiny bit wiser, I hope. Don't forget, in the end, and that's really important, you might be able to move. Yes, you might be able to change jobs, change institutions, move to a different city. But end of the day, it's still you, because that's the problem. So, you move, which means you also stay in a way. So don't think that moving fixes everything, because quite often the key question is it actually really your job, your role, the institution, or is it actually you? So think about this, reflect on this. Very frequently it's about your own behavior, for instance, that you always say yes to stuff and you overburden yourself, and then you use the job change to get rid of obligations, and then guess what? You start all over again. And after 1 or 2 years, you are again in a position where you basically have to move to manage yourself. So that's not a good pattern. On that note, I end it here. I see you next time. If you like this type of content, leave some comments, please. Like and share and spread the joy of academia. See you soon.